Like 2023, 2024 was a very, very good year for video games. So much so that, like 2023, I not only have a top 5 for you, but a top 10 best games of the year. Now, I did miss quite a few games, even regarding that. I missed out on basically every good indie game that came out this year. You name it. Nine Souls, Animal Well, Balatro, UFO 50, which I heard was actually really great. Didn't get to play all those. Um, I also didn't get to play Black Myth Wukong, which a lot of people say that's the best game of the year. That should have won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. So I didn't get to play that. I'm honestly not really interested from what I've seen. And this is coming from a Souls veteran. Just too many invisible walls I'm seeing. But I mean, I bet it is a really good game though. Besides that, but anyway, yeah, I've developed a top 10. It is a very long top 10. It is the longest top 10 of any video I've ever written. I don't know why, but I just felt like I had a lot to say about these games. So bear with me. It's going to be a long one. There may be a couple of them that you don't agree with me, but that's okay because this is just my personal list. Um, I will say that it's at least well varied. I have a few RPGs, a couple action adventures, platformers, a couple remakes, um, and I also have a DLC on the top 10. I don't usually do that, but I have to make this one exception here. Okay, you guys already know which one it is, but it was so amazing to me that I couldn't ignore it. It was bigger than most games I played this year. So I think it's fair. So anyway, without further ado, I'm already wasting you guys' time. Here are my top 10 best games of 2024. Enjoy. Number 10, Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Holy shit, guys, I can't believe it. For the first time since I started reviewing games 11 years ago, a Call of Duty game finally made it on one of my annual top 10 best games videos. If only just barely. There's a few reasons. First off, this is the first one I played on launch day since God knows how many years, thanks to Xbox Game Pass. Secondly, even if I did play and review all the recent ones that have come out day one, I never really cared for any of the recent ones. And third, and perhaps most importantly, this entry saw the longest development time in the franchise to date. And judging by the overall quality between its three separate game modes, I think it really shows. I will admit the multiplayer is the weakest link, but I still enjoyed it for the most part, but the other two major parts really shined, giving us the most extensive and non-linear story campaign to date, with the freedom to smash objectives with different means up to the player, and also delivering what is, at least in my opinion, the most fun and addicting zombies mode to date, too, with crazy new powers and more monster variety to help spice it up and keep the experience from going stale. Black Ops 6 is hands down my favorite Call of Duty since Black Ops 2 in 2012. I might even go as far as to call it my fifth favorite Call of Duty game ever, behind, of course, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, World at War, and the first two Black Ops games. And if these are the kind of new entries we could get with more development time, I say maybe it would be worth it to stop making this an annual series so that we can get more actual quality titles like these. But who am I kidding? Activision is too greedy to allow that to happen. Number 9, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. There are plenty of reasons why I wasn't initially excited for this game. Most licensed games aren't known for their quality or faithfulness to the source material. On top of that, the thought of a first-person Indiana Jones game wasn't nearly as preferable to third person, a sentiment I still hold, actually. But for what it is and by who made it, the same studio that gave us other Nazi-crushing games, like the recent Wolfenstein titles, they delivered. As big as its flaws can still be, The Great Circle does just too much else right not to recommend it, especially to longtime fans. This is the single best thing to happen to the Indiana Jones franchise since The Last Crusade hit theaters over 35 years ago. Even if that statement alone doesn't say much, but Machine Games not only did their research, they made us show just how big of fans they really are. This truly does feel like a total simulation in the crazy life of Dr. Jones. You get to experience everything in his shoes. Using your whip to traverse across deadly pits and using light sources to guide you your own way through dark, ancient passages, overcome brutal traps, and escape crumbling temples within an inch of his life, discovering mysteries of the supernatural to beating the Nazis in a dangerous stunt-fueled chase sequences that are thrilling, exciting, and oftentimes humorous. Exploring every nook and cranny and leaving no stone unturned, whether you are exploring the depths of the Vatican, the excavations of Giza, or the jungle swamps of Southeast Asia, all forms tightly into one grand epic of an adventure game, composing of a compelling story, memorable characters, and menacing villains. I love how stealth and improvisation is the front and center of the gameplay and the combat. The fist fighting works exceptionally well, and the use of the whip in combat, from pulling enemies in to knocking weapons out of their hands, never gets old. Perhaps the single most impressive thing I can say about the game is the recreation of the man himself, from Troy Baker's uncanny voice impersonation, which I believe to be the best voice acting in any game this year, all the way down to the likeness of Harrison Ford, from his head shape and chin scar, all the way to giving us his signature dry humor and fear of snakes.
Picture books for adults. I'll never get it. Goddess of Victory. Sure could use you right about now.
Oh, let me try, my turn. Huh. Appears to be some sort of phallic artifact. Perhaps a penis taken off a statue. Far too big to be David's, though. It's not as easy as it sounds, is it? See, great late year releases like these are one of the key reasons why I hate the Game Awards and how their cutoff date is so fucking early. I understand that this game is eligible for next year's ceremony, but come on. Games still come out in December and they can still be great, and this is a 2024 game. Wait until the year ends before announcing the nominees, damn it. This game easily would have been nominated for Best Action Adventure. Troy Baker could have finally won for Best Performance and rubbed it in Todd Howard's face after that mockery of a remark. It also might have gotten recognized in the Best Art Direction and Narrative categories too. Let's at least hope Troy gets in for Best Performance next year, I guess. Number 8, Tekken 8. I don't really have a lot to say about this one. I never really gave the Tekken series the light of day in my younger years, always sticking to Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and sometimes Soul Calibur. I tried the demo for this game because, well, why not? Only then did I get a sweet taste of how awesome the combat system is, how much weight your hits feel, and when I eventually did get to play the full game at a discounted price, that was when I knew Tekken 8 may have just made me a fan of this series as well. Now look, compared to the groundbreaking fighting milestone that was last year's Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8 doesn't have a lot of meat on its bones as far as single-player content goes, but what is here is amazing. The story itself is really cool, even if it's only a few hours long. The cinematics beat the shit out of any Street Fighter I've seen, and are right up there with Mortal Kombat's moments in my opinion. Each of the many, many characters also have their own little story scenario mode, also giving you the option to customize how they look, and I actually really dig the arcade quest mode where you're an underdog player rising in the ranks to become the Tekken arcade tournament champion. Tekken 8 is easily the best fighting game of the year, and now I want to play all the previous ones, even if I'll suffer from not having access to the newly added assisted control scheme. Number 7. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Many of you will ask me why I place this game on the lower half of my top 10, and I'm just going to keep it real and simple with you all. There are way too many different activities in this game for me to want to dedicate myself to so many different gameplay aspects that I need to get used to in order to master all the optional side content. And look, I get that the original Final Fantasy VII also had its fair share of weird, goofy activities, but I don't remember it feeling as mandatory or in your face as much as it is here. If you love them all, great. I know a lot of you love the card game Queen's Blood, but it's still not really my cup of tea. I do love the Chocobo racing. It feels more like a proper Mario Kart clone than the actual Chocobo GP game we got a couple years back, which was crap. And I think the carnival shooting minigames are enough of a breeze to not mind. The rest of the game, from the light-hearted approach in its presentation to the lovable characters and their progression and involvement throughout the story, as well as the gorgeous visuals and the backdrop of its open world, accompanied by one of the best soundtracks to any game in recent memory, are all worthy of top praise. The combat is, of course, bit by bit just as phenomenal as in the first remake. So far, Square Enix has done an incredible job at recreating and modernizing one of the greatest and most iconic RPGs of all time, and I trust that they can put it to a close with the third and final installment, which we will no doubt be able to finally have Vincent and Cid in our active party, just as Yuffie and Cait Sith were introduced here. I really can't wait. I hope that with a third installment, this goes down as one of the greatest video game trilogies ever. Can they do it? Only time will tell. Number 6. Silent Hill 2 Remake. Speaking of awesome remakes, Bloober Team delivered something that I thought was unachievable, at least from them based on their previous not-so-great games. They not only set out to create what became the most critically acclaimed survival horror game this year, but it even gave justice to one of the best games ever made. Silent Hill 2 Remake may not be better than the original in every way. I do think the original addressed its complex themes with more subtlety, but just about everything else they knocked out of the ballpark. The gameplay and, well, the camera are obviously better, with combat adding in a helpful dodge button, and the boss fights. My goodness, are the bosses especially designed much better. Visually, the game isn't mind-blowing, but it's still good to look at. The town is still foggy and run down in the best way possible. The voice acting, especially from James Sunderland, played by Luke Roberts, is superb and conveyed with lots of conviction. Puzzles are still a series strong point here, and the game even maintains the option to choose from different difficulties between the puzzles and the combat as before. The sound design is hands down my favorite of this year, and is perhaps my strongest bit of praise for this game. The audio was robbed at the Game Awards, in my opinion. I'm not saying Hellblade 2 also didn't have great audio, but it also didn't make me shit my pants the way Silent Hill 2's did. I am just so pleasantly surprised and impressed with Bloober Team's craft they showed here. They not only did their homework, but they got an A on it. Everything about it felt like a slick overhaul. The runtime is doubled and even includes 2 new endings. And now that they've proved their worth, I want to see them eventually remake all the other older Silent Hill games. What do you think will be next? Silent Hill 1, or maybe a cross-story between 1 and 3, sort of a father-daughter saga thing? Or will they try remaking 4? Or a new Silent Hill game altogether? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But whatever they plan on doing with this franchise from here on out, count me in. To quote James Sunderland,
I'm ready.
Number 5, Dragon's Dogma 2. Yeah, I get it. A lot of people didn't like this game, some of them for legitimate reasons like DLC consumables, which have unfortunately become a bit of a staple for Capcom's business practices, as well as having a bit of a buggy launch, some of which still hasn't been completely patched, I will admit. And then there are those who just didn't like the way the game is designed, how fast travel is not only costly, but discouraged. Fair enough if you don't want to take the time to explore the world and even find those same DLC items out there in the wild. Whatever reasons someone may have against this game, I observe is close to heart in contrast to what they were hoping for. Here's the thing for me though. I'm a huge fan of the first Dragon's Dogma game, so much to the point that it's actually one of my favorite action RPGs of all time. I prefer it over Skyrim, for fuck's sake. And it might even retrospectively be my favorite game of 2012, in a year that was already stacked with tons of amazing titles. I love Dragon's Dogma, even with all its faults and technical limitations. The fact that Dragon's Dogma 2 turned out to just be more of the same is all I ever wanted, considering the amount of years I spent waiting patiently for a sequel. Just about everything I loved from the first game is very much the essence of my experience with this one. You have scarce fast travel, where you need to make sure you're well prepared and stocked for long journeys, with survival playing a key role, and time that takes its toll not just on all the different meat and plant items which can spoil and rot over time, but on missable quest lines as well. These are all aspects that I deeply appreciate, despite how inconvenient it might feel, sets it apart from other games. I absolutely adore the combat system and how much variety was felt throughout all the different classes, from heavy hitting melee builds to using ranged attacks with bows to even being able to levitate in combat as a mage. Look, you can even float across rooftops in the city. I mean, how cool is that? You can also pick up stunned enemies and toss them, sometimes off of cliffs, and it's super satisfying. There are also hybrid classes that you can learn, like magic archery and my personal favorite, the mystic spear hand. I was blown away by this particular vocation's movesets. Some players are seemingly put off by this, but the little nerd in me really digs the Old English vocabulary. Look, I admit the game is at best nothing to write home about, and it doesn't do any one thing particularly the best this year, so I am going to create a new award just for games like these. Games that have a strong positive impact on me personally, despite me being totally aware of its problems. The only one save file at a time being the game's biggest blunder to me. Dragon's Dogma 2 earns the unique achievement of being my biggest guilty pleasure of the year. I say guilty pleasure because I'm that much aware by how much hate this game got for being the one thing I wanted it to be, a Dragon's Dogma game. I know it's far from a perfect game, but it is a near perfect game for me. It's the most engrossed I've personally been with any game to come out this year. It's also the only game of this year that I put over 100 hours into. Yes, I know, I'm insane. But I just couldn't help getting enough high fives from my teammates after emerging victorious in battle.
Well done, Master.
Number 4, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This was actually among the first games to come out in 2024, alongside Tekken 8 and Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. So if you happen to forgot this game's existence, I can't say I blame you. I also wouldn't blame those who didn't give this game the time of day, considering it's a Ubisoft game, and this still isn't enough to change how I feel about the studio as they are now. This was my first Prince of Persia experience. I was never really interested in this franchise at all, but I got this one particularly because I heard it was an amazing Metroidvania game, and to put it mildly, it really is. Every little mechanic about this side-scrolling adventure game flows seamlessly throughout from beginning to end. Every little ability, combat move, and time power are all complemented with incredibly tight controls, possibly the tightest and most responsive I've ever felt within this subgenre. Every single mistake felt entirely my fault. Not once did it ever discourage me from exploring every nook and cranny, discovering every secret, or skip past all the more challenging platforming puzzles. I took each trial as it came, learning as I went. I was even pushed so far that I refused to use the skip accessibility tool during the main puzzle sections, and what I got out of it was one of the finest crafted Metroidvanias I've ever played. Some complained that the story wasn't that great and the music was lacking, and I somewhat agree, but it barely detracted from my overall enjoyment. I love this game. I might even play through it again someday. Number 3, Astrobot, the Game of the Year winner at the Game Awards that for some reason divided every gamer on the face of the earth. I'm sorry that Black Myth didn't win. I mean, that did win Player's Voice, but apparently that wasn't enough. Look, Astrobot isn't my personal Game of the Year either, just because I'm still not really a big fan of 3D platformers in general, but there is no denying the level of talent over at Team Asobi. What can I say about Astrobot that I haven't already said in my review? Nothing. It is simply one of the greatest platformers I've ever played in my life. I called it Sony's Mario Killer, and I will die on that hill because I actually preferred this game to most 3D Marios, including Super Mario 64. Hell, I even believe this deserves all the accolades Super Mario Wonder received and more. It's pretty damn close to perfection. My only gripe was a few of the later challenge levels being very frustrating, but that's leaning more to my subjective side. It wasn't just the solid platforming and amazing use of motion control that won me over, though. On the contrary, it wasn't even what I loved most about it. At the core of this game lay the developer's intention of celebrating 30 years of PlayStation's legacy, both referencing and paying homage to dozens, if not over 100 different game series that have graced Sony's flagship console brand. Many would call this game a 15-hour-long advertisement. I beg to differ. It is simply a passionate gaming studio making the best damn thing they possibly can to show respect to PlayStation's history. And if this thought alone makes you seethe, I'm worried about your soul. Number 2, Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erd Tree. If me including Dragon's Dogma 2 and a Call of Duty game on this list wouldn't ruffle enough feathers, including a DLC certainly will. I don't usually count expansions as they often require a game from a previous year to play, but there are very rare exceptions. This is one of them, because to me, this was more than just an expansion. It was more like a new chapter of Elden Ring that transcended the already award-winning formula into something even more magnificent in my opinion. I loved the bosses more for the most part. I thought the new legacy dungeons were even more intricately well designed than most of the ones you explore in the main game, and honestly, aside from the absence of underground networks, I loved the open world even more in the DLC as well. It felt more condensed, but delivered a true sense of verticality that was often sorely missed in the base game. Artistically, the expansion is every bit as awe-inspiring as well. I gave Shadow of the Erd Tree a 10 in my review, not because I think it's flawless per se, but because I really believe it deserved an elevated score from what I gave Elden Ring, which was at a 9. As amazing as it was, Shadow of the Erd Tree taps into that missed potential, and if an expansion can do just that for an already phenomenal game, it deserves to be as celebrated as any other outstanding full game to come out this year. Before I reveal my 2024 Game of the Year, I do want to give my quick free-to-play honorable mention to Zenless Zone Zero. This is definitely my favorite free game to come out this year, just because of how unique it feels, mixing that sort of Persona-like daily life system but then adding a few twists to make it more original on its own. You play as a vigilante hacker who uses a video rental store as a front to hack into security feed. Probably my favorite thing about Zenless Zone Zero is exploring security CCTV cameras and guiding your agents around a hostile environment. And when you hit a combat encounter, it switches you to your group of agents. The hack and slash combat here is brilliant. I'm not even sure why I love it so much. I just do. And sure, after about 40 to 50 hours or so, when you finish the main story, the game does start to grind to a halt without paying for upgrades, which sucks, but almost every free-to-play single-player game is like this. At least it's nowhere near as bad as the first Ascendant. Zenless Zone Zero was the summer sleeper hit for me, giving me a game similar to Persona, but still very unique and fun in its own ways. And speaking of games that are like Persona but still unique in their own way, my number one game of the year for 2024 is Metaphor ReFantazio. Call me a man of culture. Please, I need the compliment. You know, there is not a single thing I would change about this game, seriously. Think of it as a fantasy-themed Persona without the whole school business restricting player freedom on their time. School is my least favorite thing about those games. It's actually the only thing I really don't like about them. So right off the bat, this is already my favorite modern Atlas game. Maybe this is just the honeymoon phase talking, but I believe this might just be Atlas's magnum opus. A culmination of all the hard work they've been doing, making each one of their games better than the last for over 20 years, with each learning curve a stepping stone that has allowed them to create this masterpiece. The gameplay cycle of Metaphor plays just like Persona, so its unique strengths lay firmly on its storytelling, the best narrative of 2024 about a whole nation fighting over the throne. It depicts heavy themes of political corruption, racial persecution, poverty among the lower class, and tells these concerning subjects in a way that feels reflective of the world we live in. One of the undertones of Metaphor is that it's an existence as a parallel dimension to our own. To put it simply, this is the most socially relevant game in years. I may have the least I want to tell about Metaphor ReFantazio, and maybe the reason for that is that I want all of you to play it for yourselves. It needs no further remarks. It's the best game of 2024 and is without a doubt one of the greatest JRPGs ever created, and I think is one of the defining games of the decade so far, alongside Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, Hades. On a little side note, I find it surprising that both IGN and GameSpot agree with me here for Game of the Year. We usually don't see eye to eye. Now, I did play a couple games I thought were really bad, and I also played a few games I thought were really disappointing, but I don't really have enough to make either a consistent top 5 worst or top 5 disappointing video this year for you guys, unfortunately. And even if I did, I probably would not have the energy to do another one of those right now, or ever again. What are your guys' favorite games of 2024? If you want to share them with me, I'd be happy to read them. Let's rejoice in the greatness of video games. Coming up next is my top 10 anticipated games of 2025. Hooray. Stay tuned for that one. I'll make it extra funny for you guys, and as always, thank you for watching.
The Gamer Gods! Fail!